Welcome to the Something Wicked Film Festival 2020 panel discussions. We are starting today with The House of Secrets 5 years later, and I have Kevin Powers here. Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself to the chat and also talk about what film you're representing and what your job was during it?
Well, of course, it's my film, House of Secrets, which I wrote and co-produced and directed. This happens to be my first feature where I was in charge of everything. I've worked on many features other than this one, but this is the one that was my first feature as a whole, me being in charge of writing, producing, and directing and all that type of stuff.
So talk us a little bit about the movie.
Okay, so it's a thriller. Or like I now like to call it, a dramatic thriller, in which these 4 or 5 childhood friends all are drawn into the domestic life of one of the friends who thinks that she's killed her husband. So she and her husband are off at this little cabin. Not really, it's more like a house on the lake. And she and him get in an argument. She thinks she kills him, and then she calls her best friends, which she hasn't really spoken to in a while, but they're childhood friends, to come help her out of this situation. Well, lo and behold, they get to the house by the lake and realize that not only does she think she killed them, but she also buried them in the backyard. And then, of course, he's not really dead. So once he digs himself out of the hole, he's a little pissed. So then the ladies kind of have an altercation with him, and they end up catching him and, locking him up in the basement, trying to figure out what to do with him. So the rest of the movie becomes something of a story about these 5 women who have had these personal issues over the years, who are also learning to deal with this combined issue, which is the man who's tied up in the basement.
Nice. So you talk about this being your first feature film. So talk a little bit. What was your inspiration about writing the story?
Well, 2 films come to mind. One of them is 9 to 5, and the other one is Consenting Adults. 9 to 5, if you've never seen it, of course you probably have, has to deal with a bunch of women in the workplace who end up capturing their boss and keeping them locked up in the house as they do changes and stuff to the workplace. That's more like a comedy. And then, of course, Consenting Adults, which has a lot of racy subject matter that really entwines these couples in this very adult conversation. So I ended up taking these two ideals, because these are 2 films I really enjoyed, and mixing them up, except I left out all the comedy bits, but kept the aspects that I really liked. So like the only other male character other than the guy locked up is kind of the gardener, who doesn't say anything, but he has a unique relationship with one of the other characters, who is kind of mysterious to the film. But this is very much a female piece. Like, we really spend a lot of time with the female characters in this film, which is what I want to do, because 9 to 5, surprisingly, is one of my favorite films. I laugh at it every time I see it. It's not necessarily just because of all the great female actors in the film, but Dabney Coleman is one of my favorite actors from when I was a kid. I used to watch everything that he was in. And so I just like the idea of like locking up a guy like that and letting the women go to town.
Okay, nice. So you're talking about this being your first feature. I'm guessing we're doing shorts before that. How was it kind of juggling from used to doing shorts to doing your first feature, and how much of a difference was that for you as a filmmaker?
Scheduling. Scheduling was a huge different thing for me. I've done scheduling on smaller projects, and I even helped out a little bit on some of my friends' films. But for this film, since I was producing, I had a lot of things to do in terms of scheduling, because I had 7 actors whose schedules I had to rearrange. And because we were shooting this on a practically really, really low budget, I had to work around days when they were available, weekends, nights. I traveled to different parts of Georgia. We shot in Macon for a day a day. We started making a day, and then we went to a couple other places for a day. But scheduling was huge, and I couldn't have done this film without the scheduling because I lucked out that one of my location ladies, who's also a makeup artist and costume or casting director, Andy Daniel, helped me get the location, which I thankfully got for free. It was a beautiful house on the freaking lake. We shot most of the film there. I mean, I couldn't have done this film without her and without this house. And so scheduling around the people who lived in the house versus the actors versus everything else became a tiring thing, but was also crucial. We eventually shot all together, all the different locations, 15 days for the whole movie over the course of 3 months. So
Nice. So before this, you talked about how you're working with, you work with your friend Ron and stuff and all that. So how much did that kind of working with someone else, working with a friend, seeing other features help influence you when it came your turn to do your first feature?
Well, the number one thing is I had a really small cast. If you've ever watched a Ron McClellan film, you'll realize he doesn't care about small casts. His casts are huge. Doing his films have always been a battle of wheels with a huge cast. So the first time I got to do my own feature film, I had 7 people in the entire film. At any given time, only the third act do I have the entire main cast there. Only the third act. The rest of the film, I kind of kept it to 2 or 3 people per scene. So shooting around that was really easy. One of the biggest hurdles in the film being the big scene at the end when all of them are in their huge, the denouement of the film. I had to use a second house for that because there was so much going on. And, the original location, we couldn't do all the blood and guts and all that type of thing in that film. But in this other house, we had a gracious owner who allowed us to do all this crazy stuff. Which adds to the ambiance of the film. I mean, the film wouldn't look the way it does without using the secondary house for that. But yeah, I mean, working on Ron's films, I had to think about that. Working on some of the other films, I borrowed my casting director, Andy, from some of the other films I did. My makeup artist was Renanda Anderson, who worked on some other films with Ron. I said, can you come do my film, even though it's not gore or special effects makeup? It's all just character makeup. She jumped at the opportunity to work with me on this film. I mean, my sound guy also got from Ron, but I also worked with him on lots of different shorts. I mean, everyone except for the cast, I borrowed from other films. The cast was the first. This was the first time on any one of my films where I had to start from scratch. I didn't use, well, with the exception of Sylvia Boykin, I hadn't worked with any of the other cast members really before this film. So
how was that kind of process trying to find a cast with that situation of finding people you haven't worked with before on your first feature?
It was actually interesting. Andy helped on that a lot. And so did Sherry Peterson, who ended up being one of my main actresses in the film. When we were doing the auditions, she had a great rapport with some of the other actresses and actor. With Dixie Light, she had a great rapport with Dixie Light in the auditions, and Dixie became one of our main stars of the film. And so I had this great cast of great actors, that we put together, all of which I had to learn how to commingle them in this film about 5 women who are are supposed to be childhood friends. We learned a lot while shooting the film, and the relationships between the actors may seem like they've been lifelong relationships, but my God, they didn't know each other before doing this film. I think 2 of them knew each other before we did this film, and then we all became this big team, this big family while making this film. So it became a different type of film and a different type of experience.
That's good. And with families, it's always fun memories. So what was some of your favorite memories on set? Do you have any funny moments you can remember that happened on screen or off screen?
Well, we have a lot of them. Hey, one of them, I was shooting with just a single day. We were shooting with Sherry Peterson, and we were shooting all the running sequences for the film. So her character is a jogger. So you see her jog sometime. So of course, I had a whole day scheduled to just film her jogging. Now I'm sure in her mind she thought, oh, this wasn't going to take that long. But I literally took her for like 3 hours jogging around every part of the neighborhood. And I mean, like, we did it multiple times. Like, I hate to say this, I was doing like a Stanley Cooper type thing. We were shooting the exact same thing 500 times. I was experimenting with pans, tilts. Yeah, I was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I even had my other actor, Caesar Aguirre, who's also helped out behind the scenes, riding a bicycle to get that tracking shot with her. We didn't use any of those shots because they looked horrible, but still, Caesar came out and to shoot some of those, and it was hilarious. It's just hilarious watching him ride a bicycle and do that. So I mean, there's just so many different things, and that was, it's your first film. You know, I only had 15 days to shoot it, and I overscheduled, or I underscheduled each day. So even though that day I only had Sherry, I used the whole day, like 4 to 6 hours to shoot her, and so we did a lot of running. We ran through the woods, we ran through the streets, we ran everywhere to get as many shots as I could. I mean, I did the exact same thing with Sylvia when we went to her house to go shoot all the sequences with her in her house before she meets the ladies in the film. Because we shot all of her bedroom scenes at her personal house because I wanted that sense of personality with her. Now, the funny thing is, when you go to Sylvia's house, she's a fan. I think it was Madonna that she was a huge fan of. She might kill me if I said the wrong person. I think it was Madonna. So everything, she had this huge collection of Madonna stuff everywhere. And I was like, wow, I would have never thought of you being this way. But it was funny, but it was completely out of my thought of what Sylvia was like. So it was like, wow. Now I know how people look at me when they come to my house and see I have a huge collection of horror crap in one of the rooms. So like, they probably think I'm crazy, I'm a serial killer, or something like that. But yeah, we had a lot of fun time shooting this film. I mean, I probably had a lot more fun than the actors did sometimes, because there is some emotional stuff that we just. I feel like I had to do that whole Stanley Cooper thing. There's some things in there that we just have to hammer until we got it right. But my cast was so good with working with each other, or became like this own little tight knit group, that the relationships on screen actually seem genuine because of it. And if they hadn't have done this film, they would have never even met each other before then. And I think that's one of the reasons why the film resonates with certain audience members, is because it has a strong female theme,
So after 5 years of releasing it, what's current Kevin's feelings of the film?
To be honest with you, I haven't seen the movie since we released it. I'm one of those guys who, I hate going back and watching my own stuff. I don't even watch the stuff I've done with Ron's or anyone else. Every feature I've ever seen or made, I watched them and then we released them. And then they're for the audience, and I don't ever watch them again. I know I see all the problems we had with the film, so it's hard for me to watch the movie again. But I do like to listen to other people's reaction to the film. That's one of the big things I really, really enjoyed. And if I knew then what I know now, I would have allowed the film to play at more film festivals than what it did. I was young when we did this, and I didn't fully push it enough to a lot more film festivals. Like now, at a minimum, I send my shorts up to like 40 film festivals. Back then, I was poor. So I did like maybe 10, 15 at the most, and then I, kind of saw what it did. If not, then I kind of released it out there for anyone to watch. But if I knew then what I know now, I would have taken a different route in that regard.
Were there any other? So one thing you learned was about that. Was there anything else after filming that you learned from filming this that you use for future shorts and future films that you filmed after this movie?
Oh yeah, one is I'm gonna keep my cast low. Even though scheduling, trying to scheduling was always an issue. One of the big things is I was able to give each of my actors enough of my time to help them get to the characters that they needed to get to. Whereas when I was doing the bigger films with Ron and some of the other filmmakers I worked with, it's kind of hard to manage those huge casts. So you might, when you're watching the dailies or you go back and you start editing, you start seeing these random actors in the backdrop who are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they kind of throw you out of what you're watching. But we can't fix that because, unfortunately, when we were shooting it, we were trying to wrangle 50 actors instead of just the 5 actors, In that regard, if I have a big cast, I better get myself a very good second unit director. Or not second unit director, but assistant director, so they can wrangle those actors. Which is one of the things that you don't always have when you're doing indie films, low budget, no budget films, is you don't always have an assistant director to help you in that regards. So, I mean, Ron has done some small films. Badland didn't have a huge cast, and we did wonderful in that film. And All Through the House had a small cast. But something like Hell's End, huge cast. Creatures of the Night, huge cast. I mean, wow. I mean, it's great to do those films. And don't get me wrong, I'm hoping that I can get to that point one day. But right now, keeping it containable is important to actually having a great film at the end of the whole process, and a film you can be proud of. And I could be proud of this film. I mean, the thing is, I put together, or me and Andy and Sherry put together a great cast for this film. One that I hope that they're still really, really in touch with each other and they're maintaining that closeness as actors, because they are all actors in Georgia working in the same industry. And I hope they feel like they're friends instead of like competing against the same roles and stuff like that. But I mean, Georgia film industry is growing. It's not going anywhere. I mean, the more people you know, the better chances you have of getting those jobs when they come up. And I hope that all of the cast is getting those jobs. I mean, if there's one thing I know, a lot of our actors here in Georgia are getting jobs.
Are you in touch? Did you ever stay in touch with any of the actors after the film?
I'm trying to think of, I kind of it took me a year and a half to edit the movie. So after the year and a half, I finally got in touch with all of them again. I did this nice little film book for everybody, gave that out. I think for the next year after that, we kept in tight. But then after that, I started working on other projects. And I'm sure they worked on other projects. And everyone's gone on to work on other projects. But like I said, the film itself is this relationship with all these women. I'm on the outside of that. But my makeup artist Renanda, Andy, my script supervisor Laura Chiliano. I mean, I had around me an entire casting crew of women to help me with this movie. I mean, I think the only the men on the crew really was Caesar and Vernon Mui, who helped out on this film in the male capacity. I lucked out that most of my cast and crew were all women who actually were in the film industry already, so they actually did a lot of the work, and I'm glad that they did, because I mean, the film, like I said, the actors did a terrific job in the movie. I won't say some things that I did that weren't terrific in the movie, but the actors themselves did a fantastic job, and I will stand by every one of them. They're all great.
So after 5 years, if you had a chance to either remake the movie or go back and do something different, is there anything you would go back and change?
Oh, most definitely. You don't know this, but one of the stories I like to tell people is the movie that is final that we released is missing about 25% of the story. This is what you learn as a young director doing your first movie, and you don't know your cast, and the cast don't know you, and you don't have a history of making features. Is that unfortunately a lot of the cast don't really trust always the director with certain things. The original, like I said, one of the influences was consenting adults. So there's a lot of originally in the original script there was a lot of nudity and sexual overtones, sexual scenes like that we ended up cutting out because once everyone actually read the script, they kind of gave us a second glance at some of that aspects of the film. Now those are character moments, in my opinion, but they're flashbacks. So what we ended up doing in the final film is I felt fine cutting them because they were mostly flashbacks that kind of give more insight into the relationship between actor Chris Whitley's character and the Sherry Peterson character. So Chris Whitley doesn't seem like such a douchebag character in the movie. But we cut all that out. And so the film that, as it stands now, has no flashbacks. You see no flashbacks. All the flashbacks were cut out because I realized before we shot it that it would be easier for everyone to digest the film if I cut out all those scenes that had those sexual overtones in it. But now, because I've done so many films since then, I wouldn't be surprised if every one of the actors would say, "Oh yeah, we trust you now, Kevin. We can go ahead and do the movie the way you originally envisioned it." So in that respects, I would go back and change it and add the flashbacks back in and make Chris Whitley's character not seem like such a douchebag. Right now, he seems like a douchebag from the moment you see him to the very end of the film. And that wasn't the original ideal. The original ideal was have him be a much more rounded male character. So he doesn't seem like such a guy you want to see die. So this being the 5th year anniversary, I don't mind telling people that, he actually does eventually get in the fucking grave, but but the original idea was have a well-rounded cast where everything, your relationships and the characters' relationships with each other and with the Chris Whitley character would be more ambiguous, and not have such a clear-cut, defined good guy versus bad guy. Like 9 to 5 has a clear-cut good guy versus bad guy. Unfortunately, I didn't want that originally, but that's what it ended up being. I would change those aspects, definitely. I think a lot of the film still stands. It stands well. But something like that, I think, would give it a little bit more dimension now, 5 years later. So, keeping in mind that I think we actually shot this movie, so we released it in 2015. So I think we shot it in 2013 and 2014, spent the rest of that time editing the movie before we actually released it at film festivals. So, I mean, it's not a new movie by any stretch of the matter. It's been like 8 years. And then, of course, the year it took me, the 2 years before we actually shot it, when I wrote the original script. So that movie was in my head for a good decade. Has been in my head for a good decade or so.
Nice. So as now an experienced filmmaker, if you can talk to Kevin back then filming that, was there anything you would say to him to kind of like ease the tension or ease any stress he had at the time?
Hire more crew.
You say in general to a filmmaker who's making a film for the first time.
Hire more crew. So just keep in mind, I did a lot of cinematography for it too. I mean, Vernon Mui helped me out with some of the stuff, but I was way too hands-on for this film. So I ended up, I was doing POV shots of Chris Whitley's character crawling out of the grave and stumbling towards the house. I had knee pads on with the camera in my hands falling, and I did all that myself. There's a lot of stuff I did for the film myself, and if I had more crew, I could have alleviated some of that. But to be honest with you, I feel, as a filmmaker, an indie filmmaker, you feel like you want to have that camera in your hand. I've shot other people's films before I shot this movie. So giving up that control wasn't something I really wanted to do. But nowadays, with all the experience I have behind me, I was like, there you go, Vernon, shoot the movie. Let me see the monitor. Let me control the actors' performances. I'll let you do the camera. That's what I would do now.
I gotcha. Nice. So as a filmmaker in general, what are some of your inspirations? What made you want to become a filmmaker? What movies and what specific directors kind of like sparked your like, oh, I want to do that?
Well, George Romero is my all-time favorite. Him having done Night of the Living Dead, which, to be honest with you, I wouldn't even be into horror films if it wasn't for this guy. In high school, I had seen the movie before. It was like a black and white movie when I was a little kid. Like, it's a black and white movie. You don't watch that stuff. And then, of course, one of my freaking middle school teachers told me, well, you need to look into it this way, Kevin. Your main character is an African American, and you should watch it to the very end and understand the implications. And I like, yeah, whatever, teach, man. And of course, one day I go to the library, I see Night of the Living Dead there on VHS, I check it out, I watch it, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is a zombie movie. And then the gears started rolling in your head about what my teacher told me. And I'm like, oh, you're right. This was wow, African American star who slaps a white woman. What the? So these movies could be about more than just freaking zombies killing people? What? And then I started to think. And so after watching that movie, I was like, holy shit, movies can be about something more than just freaking entertainment. And so I went to that same library in Washington State, because I was living in Washington State at the time, and I saw his other movie, Martin, which is a vampire flick. I was like, it looks weird. Vampire teeth with a freaking razor blade in there. This is weird. Let me check this out. I was like, this ain't no vampire movie. This is better. This is not some dude who burns up in sunlight. This is like a normal dude here. He can be crazy thinking he's a vampire killing people with fake teeth and slicing them up with a razor. I'm like, this movie is deep. And so that got me thinking, well, I guess movies can be about more than just being entertainment. So I started checking out every movie at the library. I mean, like, dude, I was like going through these movies, like I don't know what, looking up every one of them, watching them, returning them the next day. I'd literally check them out, watch them that day, return the next day, get another one, and I just kept doing this over and over again. It got the gears turning in my head that the movies were more about, they can be more about just being entertainment. I mean, when you're young, you watch films to be entertained. I love Lost Boys, but you go back to the gears and you start thinking about the implications and what the filmmakers are trying to say story-wise. And it's like, damn. Now that's what I want to do. I want to be a filmmaker. Before Night of the Living Dead, I had no interest in making films. Films were entertainment. I sat down and watched them on television. That's all they were for me. It was my teacher who got those gears turning in my head. Started telling me, Kevin, you should start watching some of these films. They have much more connotations and they mean a lot more. Yes, there are films out there who's strictly for entertainment. No doubt. But then there are also films and filmmakers out here trying to get deeper meaning, getting deeper thoughts for the audience to think about time and time again when they're thinking about it. And that was similar to what I was trying to do with my film. I mean, it's literally about a woman who is an abused wife and her husband's having an affair, and she finally got to the point where she can't take it anymore. The last time that, she's going to allow her husband to hit her. And so she hits him and thinks she kills him. And then who does she call? Her childhood friends to help her out of the situation because she doesn't know what to do. And so it's a movie about child abuse, or not child abuse, but wife spousal abuse. It's also about, friendship between these childhood friends, and, how we look at relationships between our friends and our lovers. I mean, that's what Consenting Adults is about, and that's what I wanted to bring to the film. I didn't want to write or produce a movie that just didn't have any meaning to it. So I'm hoping that people get that, and it stands the test of time, and people watch it more than once. Other than me, I don't.
That's nice. Is there any? Would you ever think about doing a movie similar to it again, or a sequel, or anything?
Well, to be honest with you, I still am trying to write the novelization of it. But the story actually, like most writers, the story actually is 3 parts. I just haven't never gotten around to watch the writing, the second and third part, despite the fact that the stories are in the head, and they have been for over a decade. I just haven't had the time. And I already know now that it would probably be pretty hard to get back this entire cast to do another one. It's been almost 10 years. I mean, if I was to redo it now, I'd have to probably either reconceptualize my ideal so that it fits 10 years later, or just redo it from the beginning.
Gotcha. Oh, cool. I think looking through my questions, yeah, I mean, I think that's it for any general questions. And we don't have any questions in the chat, so I'm probably I think this is a good cutoff point. So thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Well, I hope people help us celebrate the 5th year, watch the movie, let me know how they think of it, if they think about it at all. It's 5 years later. I'm sure I'll probably do something like this 10 years later when I'm almost 50 years old. So, what do y'all think about my movie? I made this like 15 years ago. Stuff like that. I just hope people enjoy it. They get something out of it, or if not, they find it entertaining at least. So, but I will say I was really proud of my cast and crew. Will always be proud of my cast and crew for doing the movie and for helping me bring the story to fruition. So, I want to thank them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time.
You're welcome.